Tango Tango Papa 2081, November 26, 2021.
Have we seen the actual reality of a monstrous crime? Or merely an illusion, the product of a tortured brain?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Tom Wiles here with you, coming to you this evening from Kingdom City, Missouri. So, I've been down in Florida. I was in Dunedin, Florida, I believe yesterday morning. Early yesterday morning, because that would have been Friday. So Friday, no. I got my days mixed up because of the holiday. Kept thinking that yesterday was Sunday, but it was actually Thursday. Today was Friday. So it would have been Wednesday evening, Thanksgiving Eve, I guess. I picked a load up in Dunedin, Florida. That's down by Tampa. And then spent the night right there because the plant there had a fairly large parking area. And they let people, or at least drivers that are picking it up or delivering their park there. So I was able to park there, and then I left there, I guess, around 4 a.m. or something like that, Eastern time, yesterday morning. Then I took that load up to our company terminal at Marietta, Georgia, and dropped it. And spent the night there, or the break anyway. Picked another load up at Marietta, and so I left there it was probably about 4 o'clock this morning, something like that, Eastern time. Maybe 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, I'm not sure, I'd have to look. But anyway, early in the morning, left there, and so I've made it now to Kingdom City, Missouri, where I've stopped for the night. I'm on my way to deliver the load to good grief, it's right on the tip of my tongue. North Platte, Nebraska. I was going to say Norfolk, but North, I knew it began with an N. North Platte, Nebraska. And so, anyway, that's what's going on with that. Weather's turned a little bit cooler, but it wasn't bad. It was like at 70 degrees or something like that down in Florida while I was there, or somewhere around that area. And then I think it was getting down into the 50s at night, and then I think today, as I was driving, I left Atlanta. It was about 50 degrees. Marietta's in the Atlanta area. It was probably maybe high 40s. Left there, and then as I came north, it got cooler. And I think the coolest that I saw was once I got to, there was a period in, I think around Chattanooga, where it was reading 29 degrees, and I'm talking about the truck thermometer, which is fairly accurate as long as I'm moving. And then, later today, it got up to around, I guess when I went through St. Louis, it was around 49 or 50, something like that. And I'm not sure I guess I could look and see what the temperature is here now. Let's see what this says. Let's see, local weather. 43 right now. It's supposed to get here at Kingdom City, Missouri. It's supposed to get down to 39, so that's not too terrible. So at least the fuel-fired heater in this truck is working. Although, when I started it up a while ago, the little LCD screen says maintenance is required. Well, I don't know why. I don't know why, but that's what it says. But it's still working. So hopefully it'll continue to work until I get the oil, or the next maintenance is due, I think, is where they sort of look everything over and grease it, and that's within about probably another 10 to 15,000 miles. That'll be due, and then I'll tell them that what that little LCD screen is saying. So, in any event, I've got I have this email address, and you hear it at the end of every podcast, tom@truckerphoto.com. And I've had that email address for years and years and years. And, I usually go ahead and program it into the phone, but it doesn't always work. Over time it seems to break. And, of course, I'm primarily using, my Gmail address, which is tomwiles@gmail.com. I primarily use that, but periodically, so I looked on there and I found an email that I had actually missed from Jeremy. And so, I found that, and then I replied to it because it was like a couple of weeks old or something, or maybe even longer, and I replied to it, and then he actually replied back, and it's I'm going to read the kind of the entire thread because it's actually kind of interesting, or at least I find it interesting. So this is from Jeremy. He says, "Hi Tom, just listened to your reflections on staying busy. It made a lot of sense to me. Frankly, my perception is that more people struggle remaining happy post-retirement than find fulfillment. That being said, it strikes me that you have an advantage over the average person. If you ever wanted to, you couldn't you always try out retirement for a year or so and then go back into trucking if you felt like it? My dad retired from AT&T years ago, and that was it. There was no simple way for him to go back to his former profession. Of course, he could always take up another trade, but that has its own challenges. I do realize you made up your mind here, but it's nice to have options, right? Best." That was from Jeremy. So once I found the email, I replied. Let's see here. Where's the reply at? Well, I thought I saw the reply. Well, this is weird, because I know I saw it earlier. So I may have to dig and find it. Because I may have to stop this and actually find it. Oh, here we go. Okay, I'm looking right at it. So, great to hear from you. This is my answer back. Sorry for the delay in answering. I thought I had tom@truckerphoto.com email address forwarded to my tomwiles@gmail.com address, but apparently it isn't forwarding. In any case, I realize it would be a mistake for me to arbitrarily quit working unless I find myself in a situation where I'm forced to do so by health or other reasons. I could always go back to trucking. However, if that was what ended up happening, I would have probably been better off not quitting in the first place. I've talked to a number of other drivers over a long period of time that did just that. They quit only to return to trucking at a later date because they decided they hated not having anything to keep themselves occupied with. Finding a new profession wouldn't be so easy. I have to face the fact that I am limited in what I can do physically simply because of my age. I've thought about the typical things a lot of retirees do, such as becoming a security guard or a store clerk, and those things don't currently appeal to me. In the meantime, I'm saving money while at the same time maintaining the lifestyle I'm used to. I figure I'll know what to do when the time eventually comes, and I'll figure it out at that point. In the meantime, at least the least course of resistance is to simply continue doing what I'm doing. I really believe in order to have a meaningful existence, it is necessary to voluntarily take on a certain level of responsibilities and obligations regardless of one's age. So that was my response back, and then he's responded back again. And this is from 5 days ago. It says, "Hi again, Tom. Nice to hear back from you. I wasn't sure if I had the right email address, so I'm glad you got it. I've copied the Gmail address on this note. Your points below are well taken, and it sounds like you've really thought this out. That said, I'm biased because I agree with you. So naturally, I think your analysis of the situation is brilliant. Some days I fantasize about how great it would be to do whatever I want all day long with no job or obligations. But in my heart, I know it wouldn't be fulfilling. It reminds me of a novel I'm reading now where the main character is a woman, a housewife/mother, who has an emotional crisis after her kids finally go off to school, and she has lots of free time. She envies her husband, who has a career and sense of purpose, a quote, knight errant with a duty, unquote. By the way, an old high school friend of mine recently left a career as a Florida public school teacher after 20 years to become an over-the-road trucker for Werner. I don't know all the details, but he found teaching to be a miserable experience dealing with administrators and unreasonable parents and entitled kids. He's looking forward to greater freedom and a career that doesn't require dealing with so many people, politics, etc. Ironically, based on his social media post, I always thought he really enjoyed teaching. It goes to show you never know what's going on behind the scenes, and someone's Facebook public face is an extremely unreliable indicator. Best stay safe, and I hope you get to stay out of Colorado this winter. And that's from Jeremy. So, yeah, the problem with Facebook is that people sort of put up a public, kind of like a, condensed version of either, they'll maximize the drama, which some people do. They kind of the drama queen types, and so you get the sort of the maximum drama. Or another thing that people do, and I think, I think this is probably the most prevalent. People sort of put up an idealized version of themselves, and so, I would probably fall into this category because, the only things I typically post, you might see the odd political post from me these days, but typically what I post is like picture of food or, some meal or something, and that's about it. And so typically if something goes wrong, or let's say because I did something stupid, or something goes wrong in general, or whatever, or something that I feel is a kind of a negative thing, I'm not going to post that on Facebook. The only thing I'm going to put on is the Facebook is just pictures of food, or maybe pictures of friends, or relatives, or whatever, and that's about it. So then you kind of end up with this sort of a condensed, idealized version. And I think the majority of people do that. And then of course you do have the people that are trying to be, that are sort of putting up the condensed, dramatic version of themselves. And I've got some relatives that do that, and it probably is a condensed version. Because they are as dramatic as what they put on Facebook. So, but I don't think. I think there are probably, I don't know what the percentages are, but I do believe most people end up putting up an idealized version of sort of themselves. So you don't really know. If people. Generally, I think if people don't like their job, particularly if they don't like their job or if they're dissatisfied with it, they're probably not going to post that on Facebook. And that might not be a very good idea, depending on the job that you have. That could be especially like a school teacher, that would be a very bad idea, because then the parents might see it, probably would see it. If the teacher's complaining about doesn't like the job or whatever, then some of the parents would probably use that as evidence to kind of attack the teacher. If they, and you're always going to have, probably if you're a school teacher, you're always going, no matter how good of a teacher you are or how dedicated you are, you're probably always going to end up with a certain percentage of people that don't like you and that would love to take you down. So anyway, driving a truck over the road especially, it's possible for me to just pretty well completely eliminate any kind of office politics. And I really do. I keep the, the politics are at zero. And I ensure that by not becoming too chummy with the people that I do have to deal with. So, anyway, I really do believe it is necessary you have to have a purpose, really, to live for. You really need a purpose to exist, and it's not just because you were born, and it's regardless of age. It's not just because you were born. It's you really need a purpose, and it's it's kind of a fancy word, but it's teleology or can't pronounce it right. It's from the Greek word telos. But it's teleology, or you could say most people say teleology, and basically that teleology has to do with meaning, but not. Well, let me just find didn't know I was going to do that, but let me find an actual definition of it, and that's going to explain it better than I can. Okay, so teleology, in philosophical terms, it's a noun, the explanation of phenomena in terms of the purpose they serve, rather than the cause by which they arise. So, you exist. Just because you're born doesn't really give you a purpose. So you need a purpose. You need a purpose to exist. Not simply because you're born or because you're retired or whatever. Or the government's paying you to sit at home and watch Netflix, as has been the case for the past year or more. Which I think that's finally dying down now, but these restaurants, like there's a Denny's here at Kingdom City, Missouri. They're finally back to 24 hours, which I'm really grateful for that. So, but it really is necessary. I was talking to this friend. I've got this friend up in Kansas that I've known for, going back into the late 70s, sometime in the late 70s. That's when I first met him, and via work. And so periodically he'll call, or I'll call him. Now, for years and years, he worked for the a fire department in a city, small city. It's kind of a smaller. Well, it's one of the bigger cities in Kansas, but Kansas isn't that big of a state, so it's it's like a city of, let's say, 40,000 or whatever. And so he was a fireman, and so he's really close to my age. I'm 66, and I think he's, I don't remember if he's a little bit older than I am, or maybe a little bit younger, but he's the same age. We're just a few months apart. But in any case, he has gone ahead and retired. So, and I've noticed that since he's retired, that he's calling me a lot more frequently, because prior to that, when he was working, sometimes a couple of years or more would go by with it, and then finally I would either hear from him or I'd send him a text message or something, or I might even call him, and but now it's as if since he's retired, it's like he's kind of calling me on a regular basis, more of a regular basis, which I'm fine with that. But, and of course this guy has always had, not only was he working for the fire department, but he's always done all kinds of landscaping around his house, and he's always working on this project and that project, and and then he's even had land that he farms and stuff like that. So he's always been busy apart from his job, and so now that he's actually retired, he's working, still working on the landscaping and, doing this and doing that. But it seems to me that he's also kind of becoming maybe more obsessed with his neighbor, because he wasn't really kind of getting along with the neighbor, one of his neighbors, and now it's like he's almost obsessed with it, so. But I was thinking about this, oftentimes, people, there's this idea that people get older, and it doesn't always happen, but oftentimes people almost can become a caricature of themselves. Once they get older, they get to especially, it depends on some people it happens at an older age, but especially towards the end of their lives, they may end up kind of becoming a caricature of themselves. And, you probably, if you've been around like a grandparent or something, by the time they get really elderly, they may get things twisted around, or and it's hard to kind of explain things to them that they might have understood, little nuanced things, and it becomes difficult to explain things. And this doesn't happen to everybody, but it does happen to a fair number of people. And I think, and this is just my theory, but I think that if you don't have a purpose to live for, something to live for, something that's giving you your existence purpose, if you live for very long without a purpose, you are in danger. This is my theory. You're in danger of becoming a caricature of yourself. Now, that's just my theory, and that I was thinking about that earlier, and I kind of realized that that's a possibility, that people end up kind of turning into a caricature. And it's probably more likely to happen if you don't have some sort of purpose to live for. Now, kind of speaking of the government paying people to sit home and watch Netflix, I came across this article that was talking about and I don't know where it was at. I'd have to go back and find the article, but they were talking, there was this doctor that they were interviewing, and this doctor was saying that during the past 12 months that cancer rates that he was seeing personally had gone up like 20 times what he would normally see. And so the first thing that popped into my mind was people are sitting at home. You've had all these people sitting at home. What are they doing? They're eating lots of carbohydrates. They're eating. And that usually means the typical person, if they're eating for pleasure, that means eating for carbohydrates, because I dare you to cut out the carbohydrates and try to eat for pleasure. You can't really do it. Whenever I stopped this evening and I went into Denny's and I ordered an 8-ounce sirloin steak with a salad and broccoli, Yeah, I enjoyed it while I was eating it. It was enjoyable, but it's not something you couldn't. I couldn't eat more of it. It's like if it was a sweet roll or something, you eat 5 sweet rolls for the pleasure of it. You're not going to do that with steak and broccoli and salad. Ain't happening. So people that eat for pleasure or eat for distraction are eating, guarantee you, they're eating carbohydrates. Now, don't know how many people realize this, but cancer cells, what cancer cells have to have energy in order to exist, in order to reproduce. They love reproducing, obviously, depending on the type of cancer cell. Some of them are more aggressive than others, but they have to have energy too, and a lot of people don't realize they pretty well exist exclusively on glucose. Cancer cells love high glucose levels. So therefore, it stands to reason if people are constantly, in the past year, they've been spiking their glucose levels more than ever because they're sitting at home bored or distracted, and they're using the food as kind of a pleasure, and it's pretty obvious because there's a lot of people who have complained they've gained weight since a lot of them were sitting at home. And I think it's pretty obvious. You just look around at people, and you can, I think everybody's got some friends and relatives that have probably gained weight, during this virus situation. So it stands to reason that is probably what's behind the increased cancer. Cancer cells exist on glucose. And in fact, there's certain types of scans that they do to find cancer cells. And of course, they put in, let's say, some sort of, if I've got this right, a sort of a radioactive dye, or it's radioactive glucose, basically. Kind of a radioactive glucose, and they use that as a sort of a dye because then the cancer cells take up the glucose, and then they sort of glow. They sort of set themselves apart more readily because they've taken up a bunch of this radioactive glucose just for the scan. So therefore, it stands to reason you cut the carbohydrates out, you're probably you're not completely eliminating the possibility you're going to end up with cancer, but you're probably reducing it. Why would you feed a monster? But I don't think a lot of people realize that, and even if they did, they probably, they'd go in one ear and out the other. But that's the first thing I thought of was, probably, if there is an increased cancer rate in the past year, it probably really is a result of people, kind of eating an even worse diet than they were prior. But you should, I really believe, you should never, ever, ever eat for pleasure. I think that's a really bad idea. Really, really bad idea. And of course, a lot of people do it. They think, well, it's normal. That's the way I was raised. It's, they've got all these excuses, rationalizations. And, when it's in reality, it's a very bad idea. Because, like I say, the only thing you're really going to get pleasure out of is, something that's really packed with a bunch of carbohydrates. Now, that it may also have other, the fat and the protein in it as well, but typically, the things that people eat for pleasure are packed with carbohydrates. Lots and lots of carbohydrates. But getting back to the other thing, I really do think that it's important to have some purpose for your, to exist, for your existence. It really is necessary, and I think it's a real danger if people don't have that. And so there's this, and I may have talked about this before, but it's worth talking about again. If I have, I really believe that a lot, part of this myth of that Jeremy even referenced there. Part of this myth that, I'm just going to be able to do whatever I want to do. And it's kind of a fantasy to have, I can just do whatever I want to. Well, I think that's kind of goes back to the idea that people feel enslaved. Maybe they feel enslaved to their job, or they feel enslaved to, one thing or another. You see, it might well be their job. And so then the fantasy kind of comes in when you think, I'll be retired, and then I can do whatever I want to. Or if I, won the lottery, had enough money, I could do whatever I want to. Well, of course, the lottery thing is very dangerous. There's a good 50% of people that win substantial lottery jackpots end up with ruined lives, or no life at all. You come back 5 years later, and they're either bankrupt and divorced or dead. Or they have family members that are dead. And I really believe, every one of us has character flaws, and the problem is, normally, in a normal situation, if you have to work for a living or whatever, that kind of restrains your character flaws. Typically, it doesn't always, but usually it kind of restrains your character flaws. And then if you suddenly come into a bunch of money, there's about a real, like a 50-50 danger that those character flaws can suddenly just run wild. There's nothing that's no economics or the economics of the situation are no longer restraining them, and then they suddenly just go crazy. And so people can just do whatever, and it's usually, typically, if it's related to a character flaw, then the inevitable result is probably going to be bad. It's not a great idea to allow your character flaws to just run wild. And like I say, normally, in normal circumstances, people are kind of restrained from allowing, the character flaws are just naturally restrained by normal economics. But I do believe there is this idea that, I'll no longer be a slave. Well, the way to deal with that, and I do believe that's probably the fantasy that people have, now that I've thought about it. So the way to deal with that is to not by, and this is kind of the way I've dealt with it, it's not by actually quitting my job and finding out that doing whatever I want to do is not all it was cracked up to be. I've talked to other people that have kind of fallen into that trap, but what I've done is I've realized that, I'm not, I'm, especially at this point, I don't have to work. I really don't have to, so therefore I'm not enslaved. I'm voluntarily taking on the responsibility and the obligation to do my job, driving the truck. So I'm voluntarily taking on the responsibility, and that makes all the difference. I'm not enslaved now. And so it's just and I think you could do that even, because of course now I'm getting the Social Security, which I'm saving. But even prior to that, same idea. I believe that it's possible to end up, even if you've got the wrong attitude towards your job or having to work, I think it's possible to change your attitude and then just realize, hey, I'm voluntarily taking this on. Because it's, you need to do something. You can't, if you could just sit, and be a blob, and then, a blob of unlimited potential. Let's say you have a baby that's born, and, and the baby's, what is a baby? It's, for one thing, it's full of potential, but then it develops into a child. So you got this child that's full of potential, but in order to actually become something worthwhile, you got to choose something. You got to choose something. Maybe initially, you can, when you're a child, you can fantasize about this, and children do that. Obviously, they fantasize about doing this or doing that, but you start to become an adult, you're going to have to choose something. Maybe you choose from a couple of different things, and and of course you choose, and and that's your career. Depending on the age that you do it, it can be kind of a hardship, and then maybe like Jeremy's friend there decided, I guess after after he'd taught for some period of time, that he's just going to become a truck driver. And so a complete change of career. Now that's a fairly easy. The biggest problem, being a truck driver is actually, I think it's psychological, especially the over the road. Being gone all the time. You are wherever that truck is, and that's probably the biggest psychological hurdle to overcome, because driving itself, it has its moments, but it's not all. I don't find it to be stressful. Now some people do, but I just don't, and that may have to do with probably temperament. The vast majority of the time, I enjoy my job. I really do. But you got to, at some point, you got to kind of, adult has to sort of hone down the, and they've got to decide, well, I've got to do this or I've got to do that. Let's say they've got a couple of choices. Well, they got to pick one of them, and then. Then they're throwing the other potential away in order to do something. That means you've got to really kind of shave things down and throw the other potential away. And the last thing you want to do, do you know somebody that's in their mid-30s that's still living at home in the basement? And there's almost a stench about a social stench about someone like that. Because they had the potential and then they just never developed it. And there's a real social stink that's involved with someone like that. So you can't just hold on to all the potential. You have to throw a bunch of it away and pick something and become that. And I think sometimes people kind of look at retirement the same way. Well, I've got all this potential that I could do. The potential for this and potential for that. Well, you're going to have to pick something. In order to find, really, I believe this. I can say it this way: in order to find meaning, you have to pick something, and then do it. Voluntarily take it on, and and it's not like somebody's with a chain and a whip saying you have to do whatever. If you can voluntarily pick something, there's a vast psychological difference between that and being forced to do something. You can say, well, I'm going to choose this, and at least I'm choosing it. It's going to be difficult, but I'm going to choose it. At least I'm choosing something, and I'm, dragging some weight up the hill. So, but I think it's really important to have a purpose. Absolutely important. But I do, it is my theory that people are in a real danger. I'm not saying it happens to everybody, but it is my theory that people are in danger of, if without a purpose to exist, they are in danger of becoming a caricature of themselves. And that may be what happens to, I was talking about somebody that's 30 years old living in the basement, living in mommy and daddy's basement. I think they're without purpose. They do become caricature, and that happens. They may be 30 years old, or they might even, even at age 25, that's kind of getting stale. Someone gets much past the age of 25, it's starting to stink. And I do believe they do end up becoming caricatures, even at a younger age, without a purpose. Unlimited potential doesn't age very well. So, anyway, Jeremy, thank you for the emails. And so I will try to periodically look at that tom@truckerphoto.com email address and kind of see what pops up. It's kind of hard to, because the thing's not popping up right, and so I have, I don't know if I can kind of manually force it. Then the other problem I have, I get all this junk mail, and I don't always look at the email. Sometimes I'll search through it because I get so much junk mail. Just even on the Gmail address, I'll just kind of put in different search terms, in an attempt to see if someone's actually sent me an email that's not junk. So there have probably been email interactions that I never saw because either I didn't, the email address wasn't working properly, or I just missed it. And that's unfortunate because interaction is really useful. Whether it's someone sending me, like Joel sends me Voxer files or emails, they're actually quite useful. So the interaction is really useful. So I do have some files from Joel. I think they're going to probably add up to around maybe 15 minutes worth or so, or maybe a little bit less than that. So here is Joel.
All right. Well, be a week ago this past Friday. I had a 2017 Traverse, and I was getting off of I-270 or I-71 North to 270 West, and somebody in front of me who did not have their lights on just came to a full stop in the middle of the off ramp, all by himself. And it was a little bit drizzly, so I slammed my brakes on. Was gonna hit him regardless. So what I ended up doing was I steered it off to the right, smacked my car into a guardrail. Okay. So it's totaled. Actually, it's already replaced at this point. Got a ticket that for some reason is not in their system yet, but I'm not going to deal with that today. I want to try and deal with that tomorrow. I did contact my insurance company, so we're getting the new car all insured and all that jazz. So, but during that, my wife was with me. She had a little bit of pain after the accident. So Saturday after, we took her into urgent care, and then they ran down and did an X-ray. We never heard anything, never heard anything, and then went to the hospital where the X-rays were done, and got her results back from radiology there because we never heard anything. And apparently, she had some cracked ribs, kind of non-displaced, so nothing was dangerous. It was just painful. Nothing you could do for those. All right, so, but the thing that concerned her the most was that on the X-ray, it looked like her heart was having issues. So we set an appointment for our family doctor. We were just there today. All right. All that just to tell you, not so much the information about the accident, but just because I went with her today, and it ended up resulting in a good conversation with the doctor because my wife started asking the doctor about COVID and the vaccine and all that. My wife has a part of her job. She technically has two jobs, but she has the one with their data entry, and then another one that is basically taking care of my son. And they are saying that she has to get the vaccine as I think December 30th. So I guess if nothing changes, and the Supreme Court doesn't say that vaccine mandates are illegal, that is something she will have to do. Okay. She did fill out paperwork, because you can fill out paperwork for a religious exemption, even though I will say this, our religion doesn't really forbade it, but whatever. So if that doesn't come through, and everything still holds, and she'll have to get the vaccine. But she came right out and asked the doctor what he thought about the mandate, and he kind of gave us an off the record thing. I'm not going to give you his name or anything, but he said he didn't believe in a mandate. All right. He got vaccinated, of course, because he had to for his job. And this kind of goes back towards where our doctors are kind of being made to do things they don't want to do. That would be the vaccination and also the mess. They literally have to, because they take Medicare money, they literally have to do what the federal government tells them to. Okay? And he gave a very balanced and very scientific answer for it, which I was really glad about. And he basically called the vaccine what it is, an experiment. And it kind of is. I do have the vaccination. I did get a booster, and I made these just because I thought it was the best decision for me. My company doesn't actually have one yet. Mostly because we have not returned to the office yet. We're not returning to the office at least through the rest of this year, if not longer. So, in any event, what boils down to here, though, is I got probably the most balanced answer from my doctor. Because so happens my wife and I both see the same doctor. So, and it was encouraging, and this is kind of why a lot of medical people are coming out against this. But I just found it incredibly interesting.
Thank you, Joel. So yeah, I did see the picture you posted. I guess you posted a couple of pictures on Facebook, and of your car, kind of in the running into into the guardrail, but you didn't really kind of explain what happened. So I'm glad that you kind of explained how that worked. So I guess the guy was just completely stopped and didn't have any lights on, and he was just stopped in the off-ramp. So that's that you're kind of screwed. Depending on the off-ramp, I could see where you could really get into trouble that way. Now today, when I was going, I had to go, I crossed on Interstate 70 near downtown St. Louis, and so where 70 sort of after you go across the Mississippi River and you come into downtown St. Louis on Interstate 70, where it sort of joins this other part of an interstate, there was and there's an on-ramp, basically, even though it's all kind of I-70, there's this on-ramp, and so there was this car that was just, and of course it was daylight, but the car was towards the end of the on-ramp, or actually the acceleration lane, and he was just kind of parked in the acceleration lane. I don't know, it was just sitting there. I couldn't really tell if there was anybody in the car or not. Maybe it died right there, but he could have pulled it off to the right a little bit more. There was like a big wall, but in any case, he could have pulled it off more, but it was kind of almost hanging, it was in the acceleration, at the end of the acceleration lane, very close to one of the regular travel lanes. So I could see how, somebody, with a vehicle like that, it could get, that would be dangerous. But, so in any event, yeah, I could see how that could happen. If people do something, that's really completely unexpected like that, that can cause trouble, obviously. So I'm assuming, that you both of you must have had your seat belts fastened and what have you, and so. Which, I think that does help. Now, I don't know, a few years ago, my parents, this has been several years ago, they were involved in this accident. This woman hit them from behind. They slowed down. They were on a 2-lane road in Texas, a 2-lane highway, and so there was this car that had a flat tire or something, and then there was a truck there changing, like a repair type thing, changing the tire or something or other. And so Dad, of course, slowed down to go, they were off on the shoulder, but he slowed down. And so there was this other car that was, she just didn't see them, and she hit them at full, she's going 55, 60 miles an hour and hit them. And I don't even think she applied the brakes, but in any case, that caused, their car to, totaled their car, of course. They'd had that car for like a month. It totaled their car. It was a small, it was a subcompact car they had, and it was a subcompact car that the woman hit them with, fortunately. Because if it would have been a bigger vehicle, it would have done a lot worse damage. But as it was, it caused, she sort of hit them, more towards the, not really squarely, but more towards, she was starting to maybe at the last second, she was trying to veer to the left a little bit. And so that caused them to, a sort of a twisting motion. So Mom, initially they didn't think anything was wrong, and then the next day Mom and they were both seemed fine. My middle brother went down and he drove down. He was able to kind of drop everything and drive down there and get them, and then brought them back to Arkansas. They were on their way to Arkansas, but he brought them to Arkansas, and then they seemed okay. The next day. But then the day after that, I think Dad started, developing problems initially, and they realized that he ended up with a brain aneurysm, and kind of long story short, they had to do surgery to allow the pressure off of his brain. And he was getting, it was getting to the point where he didn't know his own name, and it was very serious. Now, he happened to be one of the 1% of people that have that extent of injury that end up making a full recovery, after the surgery. Because they the brain, if the brain's injured, or if you have any kind of aneurysm, or you get a bruised brain with an aneurysm, there's no place for the blood to go. There's no place for so it starts compressing the brain. There's no place for the brain to really swell. With inflammation, there's no place for it to swell, and so you end up with brain damage, or potentially. So it's starting to compress his brain, and they were able to do a scan and find that, and then of course they did surgery as quickly as they could, but they basically bored a hole in his skull and let out the pressure is basically the treatment. So, but he made a full recovery, and that's with the extent of what he had, that is highly, it's like 1% of people recover fully from that, and he's in the 1%. So, thought everything was fine, and then, a few days later, Mom is experiencing problems, and it turned out that her pancreas, was it a pancreas? No, wasn't a pancreas. I'll think of it in a minute. It's right on the tip of my tongue. It's an organ you can actually live without. But whatever it was, it really got bruised, and they sort of watched it, and then she made a full recovery from that. I wish I could think of the name of the organ, but they can actually remove the organ. It has to do with the immune system. Maybe I can look that up. Let's see. Talk to Google here. Let's see. Organs that deal with the immune system.
According to Biology Libre texts, the key primary lymphoid organs of the immune system are the thymus and bone marrow, and secondary lymphatic tissues such as spleen, tonsils, lymph vessels, lymph nodes, adenoids, and skin and liver.
No, it was something else. Let's see. List of internal human organs. Okay, it's not going to talk this time. Okay, so you got, let's see, kidney, heart. Oh, there's 20 more. Okay, liver, lung, stomach, pancreas, human skin, large intestine, small intestine, spleen. That's what I couldn't think of. Her spleen became very bruised, and it was actually they realized that she had some internal bleeding. And so it recovered. They just said, well, we'll see if it recovers, and if it doesn't, then we can do surgery. But it recovered, and she was okay. So, that, but that was just as a result of that accident. And so the accidents, they can kind of be, of course, they had their seat belts on and what have you, but and of course then the car they had all these extra airbags, and I think that also helped as well. As well as the fact that the car that hit them was also a subcompact vehicle, because it would have been about the same weight. So therefore it would have, it had, because if you have a bigger vehicle hitting a bigger object hitting a smaller one, the bigger one's going to have more momentum, and it does more, you're going to have more damage than you would from two similar sized objects or with similar amount of mass. But of course the one was moving quite a bit faster. So in any case, that's something else. So fortunately you didn't have any kind of, hopefully you don't have any serious problems from it, or your wife doesn't. So, but I think there's probably a lot of doctors that can't really, they have to be careful about what they really think, because they've got to present the politically correct, the so-called politically correct statement. They can't really say what they think without fear of some sort of major reprisal. And it has to do with the type of job that they're in. It's more, being a doctor is more of a high-profile type of job, and of course people, when I say high-profile, people look up to doctors, typically. I've talked about this before. Years ago when I worked at an eye clinic as a computer network administrator, I noticed, and I just can't help myself, I'm always noticing things, and I noticed at the time, that the people, the patients, really looked up to the doctor. Some of them insisted that, of course, this was an eye clinic, and they also had optometrists working there. And some of the patients would insist that the doctor do the refraction. Let's say they needed glasses or whatever, which was actually a bad idea, because the optometrist probably did a better job than because they did refractions all the time, whereas the doctor not so much, because he concentrated on doing surgery. So, in the more difficult cases. But people, a lot of people will have this googly-eyed look in their eye, when they see their doctor. And you can kind of tell, that people sort of think of the doctor as, reverentially, almost like, they're worshiping the doctor. The doctor's, in their mind, the doctor's some kind of a god. It's like they're, worshiping a totem in a corner. And it's possible, you want to respect your doctor and what have you, but, or anybody, but, anybody that's doing something, but, that's got some degree of expertise, but don't worship them. And there is a difference, and, sometimes there might be a fine line, but, you don't want to worship your doctor, But that aside, because of that, a lot of doctors, and I'm sure there's a lot of doctors that don't want to be worshipped, same way with preachers. And sometimes even school teachers. There's a lot of different jobs like that where people sort of, where it may be more likely that people will sort of put these people up on a pedestal. And I think a lot of people pay for, they go into a doctor's office and they're sort of wanting the medical experience. They're wanting the uniforms. They enjoy the fancy waiting rooms. And I'm guilty of that. I went when a month and a half ago, had the eye surgery, the cataract surgery. Yeah, the place I went is really nice, really, really nice modern building. Got all the latest modern technology, the equipment, all of the staff's very friendly. By the way, I never did meet the doctor. Never met the doctor at all. But he, of course, I was kind of knocked out whenever he did the surgery. So, but I never did actually meet the doctor, which is fine. I mean, he did this. His functions doing the surgery, and he did a great job. So it's not really necessary. But I did enjoy the nice office. If you go into a place like that and the place is dirty, or it's got like a bunch of worn out furniture for the waiting room, or et cetera, then it's probably not presenting a very nice image. But part of it is image. So, but yeah, I could see where a doctor would have to be very, very careful about saying what they really thought. They'd have to, and even at that, they'd have to, I guess as a doctor, if the doctor was a good judge of character with particular patients, then then he or she could say what they really wanted to. But even at that, they'd probably have to be sort of judicious about it. So, but I guess it's been probably the better part of a year ago. I had the last so-called wellness check. Sort of like a physical, but that the Blue Cross and Blue Shield pays for. But and I talked to that doc. Of course he was wearing a mask, and and I kind of told him I didn't think the mask did much, and he said, "Yeah, I don't think they do either," but he had to wear them. So, he was kind of candid with me, but but there's certain jobs where people just are kind of trapped. Now, as far as the mandate goes, we'll see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen with it. I think that it's probably not going to go anywhere. And the thing is, there are places where, like Gibraltar, which is, very close to Spain. But I think it's actually, like British protectorate. Got a population of about 30,000 people. I think Gibraltar's an island, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe part of a peninsula, or I'm not sure. I'd have to look. I'm kind of ignorant about it. But anyway, the population's about 30,000, and virtually everyone there is vaccinated. They actually, they've got 100%. It's the highest vaccination rate in the world. Well, right now, they're, even though it's only 30,000 people, they're having a big spike in cases, in COVID cases. And they're 100% vaccinated. So I'd say that's a big disappointment. So, and then they'll come back and then they'll say, well, not as many people are dying. So then the argument is that the vaccine has lowered the death rate, because they're comparing the death rate now with the death rate when this thing all first started. Well, there's a difference that nobody's talking about. And I thought of that today. There are other treatments besides, they're doing other treatments. They figured out other therapeutics that they can utilize that have substantially reduced the death rate. No one's talking about that. They're doing all these therapeutics, but they're trying, the people that are ideologically possessed by the vaccine are, they're comparing apples with oranges as if they're all one thing, and they're not. Because they've developed therapeutics in the interim. Since this thing started, they've developed therapeutics to kind of lower the death rate dramatically. But then they're trying to say, oh, well, it's all the vaccine that did it. That's why it's lower. It's the vaccine. But there's a lot of people that are ideologically possessed by they're seeing the vaccine as a savior. Kind of, they did the similar thing with the masks. So now I'm going to be, next month, starting on the 16th, I have my vacation, and I'll spend that vacation with my parents. And so, not really sure what's going to happen this year. Either they're going to come up to my house and kind of hang out like they did last year, or we could meet in Galveston, Texas. Done that a couple of times in the past. Or potentially I could go down there and just kind of, and I've done that a couple of times, where I get a hotel room and then I spend the days with them. So not exactly sure what's going to happen yet, but I have decided there's going to be one thing. Not only will I not discuss politics with my parents. There's been, some period of time where I've just made any kind of political discussion is off limits. And if it starts, I immediately shut it down. And I've decided I'm going to do the same thing with the vaccine. They're ideologically, especially my mom's, ideologically possessed when it comes to masks and the vaccine. And maybe I'm ideologically possessed by the idea that I don't want it. But I think it's really, if you think about it, which came first? Not having the just a natural state of existence, and then the vaccine kind of comes along, and then people are trying to say, oh, you're anti-vax, like, put a label on you. You're anti-vax. You're an anti-vaxxer. As if I'm ideologically possessed. Well, they're the ones that are ideologically possessed. Because the vaccine it's kind of an add-on. That's really the ideological possession. They see that as a savior. And really it's just a giant experiment. That companies are making billions and billions of dollars on. Using fascism to sell it. Using the apparatus of the state to force people to buy it, or to force it, well, it's free. No, it's not. The taxpayers are paying for it. So, needless to say, I'm not going to, I won't take it, but I'm not going to, and I won't take it for anybody, including my parents. Not doing it. Ain't happening. So, but I think I don't think it's going to happen. I think that this administration is this faux administration is going to. I think it's falling flat on its face, and I think this is just it's a move. It's a desperation move. But the vaccines themselves are not really doing anything. I'm sorry. Same thing in Ireland. Ireland's got a very high vaccination rate, not quite as high as Gibraltar, but then they've also got a spike in cases. You could say, and same thing, oh, well, the death rate's lower. Well, there are therapeutics. It's not the same as it was when it started. So, anyway, before I keep talking forever, Joel's got another file here that looked like it was about 5 minutes long. So here, once again, here's Joel.
So back to the car, though. This is also kind of an interesting thing, kind of the economy, kind of the COVID. But we went to go look for a replacement vehicle. It got totaled. Our other one got totaled. So we wanted to get basically kind of what we had before, except for a newer version of it, of course. And used cars as well as new cars are very hard to find now. Especially if you're looking for something specific. And we actually got really lucky in that when we walked into the dealership Friday night. We wanted another Chevy Traverse, so I found a 2022 Chevrolet Traverse RS, which is not as high as the model we used to have, although it does have things that our old car did not. But every car dealer that we went to, which we only went to two, because really they were the two best in our area, the ones with the most selection. Both dealers said they had anywhere from a $5,000 to a $7,000 above sticker price that they were charging on all their cars, and that's just because they can't get the cars in. I've heard someone theorize that certain things like that have become standard in a lot of vehicles now may get deleted in future years because of the chip shortage. Namely, the one that they mentioned was heated seats, which mine does have. So, but that was an adventure. That took a top end, like across the street, which is also owned by the same guy, was the Buick and GMC dealership. When we saw a Buick Enclave Avenir, which is their top trim level, and normally that one would be about 68 or 66, somewhere around there. But by the time you added the extra $7,000 they were charging, it was close to $70,000 for a 3-seat SUV. So, but it was a gorgeous one, and I really, really wanted it. But I'm kind of glad we didn't, because it probably would have had a. What ended up happening is the RS that we got over across the street, Traverse RS 2022, it's silver, has black rims, it looks really nice. But that one, by when all was said and done, when we put the money from our settlement down, because we got about $30,000 out of our other car, we only owed about 17 on it, so we had 16 that we could use to put down on the new car, which we didn't put 16, we put 15 down on it. And that ended up getting us with an exact payment that was the same as our old car. So for 75 months is the term. So, I'm really enjoying it. Probably my most favorite things on it is that the 2022 we have now versus our 2017 has adaptive cruise control, which is phenomenal. That is by far my favorite thing in our new car. The other is the cameras that are all around it. It has cameras. It's kind of the frustrating thing with me, though. It does have cameras all around it, but I don't think they will record video to the. There is an SD card in it that's for the nav system, which I think there's a fee payment on that. I don't know. I haven't. We're still in trials, like for OnStar and for the rest of it, but I really don't care too much about the nav system that's built into it, because it has a Android Auto in it, which is fantastic. For the most part, and it's the wireless variant, so it'll work with either a wire or a wireless, and it also has a charge pad in the middle of the console, and that's just where my phone will go, and it will wirelessly charge up as we drive along. But that's one thing. Excuse me. Plus, it does have the lane keep assist. So if I start to drift, not only will it, if I drift too much, it will pop an alarm, but it usually doesn't let you get that far, because it'll end up gently steering you back towards center automatically. Kind of different than some cars. Some cars will vibrate the steering wheel to remind you and just to wake you up, which I don't think the Traverse does that, but. Thus far, I'm liking it. One thing too that I don't know if you've ever purchased accessories for like your Yaris. I think you have a Yaris now as your newest car. If you need accessories, check out Amazon, because I was able to find a cargo net for the back of my Traverse for $16. So definitely worth checking out on Amazon.
Okay, well, thanks again, Joel. Yeah, so you're talking about the cars and the dealerships. I think the dealerships, I'm sure people are whining, they're not too happy about the, like in your case, it was a $7,000 upcharge over the sticker price. But there's a lot of dealerships, like we'll say vehicle dealerships that, and I see a lot of them that don't have much inventory. Their inventory is quite limited. And that's really affected their sales. And so some of them are, there's some dealerships have just gone completely out of business. There's, I see a lot of abandoned dealership buildings as I drive around. They're kind of here and there. I sort of notice them once in a while. You can say, yeah, well, there was a dealership there, but it's gone, whatever it was. Or if they're still in business, then I can see where they have to have that in order to stay afloat. And I'm sure the consumers probably don't like it, but at least it's the vehicles are available. If you want to pay the premium, it's available. It's kind of, you can kind of think of it as, and I'm sure I've used this analogy before, but if let's say you have beachfront property, how do you determine who gets to live on the beachfront property? Do you just do a lottery, and some people might get lucky, and most people are unlucky? How close do you get to live to the water? Or do you come up with a pricing scheme where the closer you get to the water, the more people are willing to pay, and the people that really want to live on the beachfront property are willing to pay the price? So that's really the fairest way. And so the same thing is kind of happening with car dealerships. Even though it's kind of unfortunate that you have to, the price has kind of gone up, and so it does kind of, you do have to kind of pay the premium. Now, I'm wondering, just as an aside, I'm sure you've seen periodically you see these videos of, and I've actually driven past them before. You'll see like a big, like a video, and it hasn't happened lately, but it's probably not happening at all. But you'd see these videos, and you could probably still find the videos on YouTube, from prior years before this virus thing started. You'd see these big, it's like X car maker has produced all these cars, and there's all these cars that are just parked in this parking lot. And there might be thousands of cars parked somewhere, around, in some parking lot near a city or something, in some cities. You'd have all these produced cars, and they were just, what are they going to do with these cars? They're just sitting there. New cars, and they haven't been sold yet. Well, I bet you that those are all used up by now. Because I'm not seeing too many parking lots full of cars that are obviously either new cars or even used cars. Very seldom do I see a parking lot like that. Once in a while I do. I like if it's an auction or something, I've seen some. But they're kind of few and far between. So, but it is a problem, this chip thing, and there's another potential problem. See, I guess 80% of the chips actually come from foundries in Taiwan. 80% of the world's chip supply comes from Taiwan. Okay. Well, China right now is threatening to take over Taiwan. They think they see Taiwan as, or at least the Chinese Communist Party sees Taiwan as a thorn in their side, and basically they keep saying that they're just going to take it over. It's really part of China. They want to take it over. So that, the 80% of the chips coming from there, that could even be worse. That could be a giant chokehold. More than it already is. So, but anyway, let's see. But that's kind of a big problem. That not being able to get the vehicles. And you'd think, well, they would start making the vehicles more simple, but it's not so easy. Because of government regulations and because people have expectations. You had an expectation of, you wanted at least maybe the equal of the car that you had, if you could. And that's typically what people want, or if But you are also talking about the cameras. That's an interesting thing. This truck, I probably mentioned it. I've been in this truck now for the better part of a year. I've got a little over 100,000 miles on it now. It's over 100. I've put over 100,000 miles on it, and it hasn't quite been a year yet, which that's typical. Because I'll typically drive around 105 to 110,000 miles a year. The company truck. So, but in any case, it has these cameras in sort of the top center of the windshield. There's this rectangle. There's a rectangle. It's about a foot. It's roughly a foot wide and maybe 6 inches tall, and it kind of comes down in the center of the windshield. It's located at the top. It's in the center. And if you look at it from the outside, you can see these camera lenses. So I didn't really know what they did with it. I guess I could have probably done research and figured it out. But so the other day I was in this. It was actually a Dollar General distribution center in Indiana. big, warehouse and grounds and what have you, and they got all kinds of drop trailers, and so it's a big place, pretty good sized place. So I had to unload in there, and so when I was on the way out, they have a speed limit. It says, a lot of these places will have their own speed limit signs, and I think it said speed limit 15. And it just so happened I noticed the speed limit as I was on the way back to the guard shack. There's this sign that says speed limit 15, and just right after I passed it, I happened to notice that, in the dash display, there's an LCD dash display in the center of the dash in front of the driver. The thing popped up and it said speed limit 15. Now, I was under the impression, initially I thought, well, they're doing the speed limit based the same way that GPSs do the speed limit, because the GPSs are all doing speed limits from an internal database. You update your GPS, and if your GPS, like most of them now, will display the speed limit, then you get the latest database, and then it's just displaying the speed limit. Well, what's happening, I've determined now what's happening every time. If I pass a speed limit sign, it says speed limit, whatever, if it's the right type of sign, then it automatically just, these cameras, there's something, that's watching the cameras, and it's able to recognize that says speed limit, whatever, and then it changes. Because I was wondering, well, how is this changing? Like, let's say I come to a construction zone and all of a sudden it's got the right speed limit for the construction zone. And how in the world is that happening? And I thought, well, I wasn't sure, but what it's doing is recognizing the speed limit signs, and then it pops it up on on that display, or the certain part of the display. It's just one of the modes. They're calling it driving assistance. So, but probably if it's in your Traverse, probably that's using those cameras are probably also aimed at the like the lines on the road. You probably have you got the cameras that are aimed at the lines that are on the road, as well as maybe cameras that are aimed down. Let's say like on the under the car, there may be cameras that are sort of aimed down as well to pick up those like the lines at the edge, the lane lines. So, but those technologies they can be useful. They certainly can be useful. Now some of these speed limit signs, let's say it's for a construction zone, or some of them that are non-standard signs. Maybe it's an LED or it's an LED type sign. This system in this truck does not recognize that. If it's too far out of the standard, it has to more or less look like a sign that says speed limit, whatever. Like a white background with black lettering. Now, if it says speed zone, like reduced speed ahead 45 miles an hour or something like that, it's smart enough that it doesn't change until you actually get to the sign that says speed limit 45 or whatever it is. So, but, I don't know. So some of that stuff can be useful, I could see where that could be quite useful, and then it's kind of nudging you back in the lane, so that I could see where that would be useful as well. Now, the downside with that, this truck has adaptive cruise control, but the downside that I find with it is that what ends up happening, I'll have these people that pass, It's not everybody, but there's a certain percentage of people that pass, and then they slow down. Or that, and maybe they don't, they sometimes people will pass because they can't stand to be behind a truck, and so they pass the truck and then they slow down. But then you have the people that pass the truck. They're not using their cruise control to maintain their speed, and so then they'll slow down, and then all of a sudden they speed up, and then they'll slow down and they speed up. And, in the truck, I want to just maintain the speed, whatever, let's say the speed, I can go 65 miles an hour, and that's the top speed of the truck is 60, currently they have it set at 65. Now they're going to be changing that to 68. Whenever the next time my truck goes into the shop, they'll change this. They did announce they're changing it to 68, but in any case, it goes 65. But then somebody will pass, and then they'll, they're not even, and it's probably a car or a pickup, and they're not even driving. Maybe the speed limit's 70 or 75, and they're just kind of lolling along at 60 something, and then all of a sudden they're distracted or whatever, or their foot gets tired, and then they'll drop down, and then all of a sudden my truck is slowing down. So I don't know, I kind of find it annoying. Now, in a car it would be a different story, because a car can speed back up pretty quick. But typically what will end up happening is the vehicle in front of me will end up slowing down going up the hill, because they're not paying attention, they're not using their cruise control, and then they'll realize it and they'll speed up, but in the meantime they've caused me to slow down, and then I'm trying to lug up the hill, so it's caused me to lose speed, and then I have to go up the hill slower than I would have otherwise. So, but, I can see where that could be useful, having the adaptive cruise control, and then you probably also have a brake assist type thing, which that can be useful too. If the idea, and this truck has that, if the vehicle suddenly slows in front, then it will apply the brakes. Or even if I'm putting my foot on the brake, it'll actually, if somebody's slowing down faster in front of me, it will actually apply more brake than I'm putting pressure, than I'm asking for. Put it that way. So but that's actually kind of useful. What's not useful, and I've only had it happen once or twice in this truck, what's not useful is when the system recognizes an overpass as if it's about to run into a wall, and then it suddenly, I've had it do it once or twice, it'll just really hit the brakes hard. And it's because for whatever reason, it can recognize an overpass as something it's going to collide with. And the other part of this system that's annoying is, and it happens more frequently. Let's say that there's vehicles ahead of me, and they're slowing down, and they're going to exit. And they actually move into the off ramp, but this system still will apply the brakes, because they're slowing down because they're on the off ramp, they're getting off, and even though they're out of my lane, this system frequently will, it'll go ahead and apply the brakes, slowing, even though they're in the right lane, and I'm in a completely different lane. So the system's sort of following them as they switch lanes. which is kind of strange. So, but anyway, it's got its quirks, and then it, so anyway, probably better be cutting this off. See if I can get it uploaded. Hope everyone has had a great week. Hope you have a great weekend, and I will catch you later.
Remember, Trucker Tom is like Visa. He's everywhere you want to be.
Product reviews, restaurant reviews, photos, opinions, and more. Visit Trucker Tom's website at www.truckerphoto.com. You've been listening to Trucker Tom's podcast, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. All you have to do is send us an email to tom@truckerphoto.com.